Okay, thank you very much for coming to this second session that I'm doing at TechEd. I'm delighted to be here again. I'm going to drill a little bit deeper into some of the ways in which we've been developing products in the last couple of releases around data collaboration and productivity. We've had two major releases this year, SQL Server 2008 R2 and Office 2010. Office 2010 including Office Client, Excel, and so on, and Office Server, including primarily SharePoint. These are all pretty critical parts of our infrastructure. I want to give you an idea of how all this works together, not just about each individual component, because we've had sessions on reporting services and Power Pivot and so on if you needed the details. I want to give sort of a picture of how these things work together to improve data collaboration and productivity. And to do that, I think the probably easiest way to start is simply by kind of walking through a typical day in the life of Donald Farmer and how data collaboration and productivity factor into my daily life and how SQL Server supports me in doing that. And I'm delighted to be here, but I've got to tell you, I travel too much, especially this year. And you only need to ask my wife about that. So my typical day actually involves waking up in a hotel somewhere and staggering out into the corridor after my shower and looking for sustenance. And because I'm from Seattle, the first place I need to find sustenance would be at Starbucks. And once I've actually got some coffee inside me, it's time then to check, for example, stock exchange numbers, which are typically fairly depressing. And so after that, I need to kind of cheer myself up a little bit, so I look at the Formula One results. And I'm a McLaren fan, so I'm pretty happy with the Formula One results just now. And they're also good customers of ours, which helps. So after a bit of amusing myself, it is actually time to get in a cab and get to the office in whatever city I happen to be in. And once there, of course, it's time to get down to work, open up the laptop, get on with some work with my customers. And that's generally pretty interesting but pretty tiring. And of course, I'm visiting different cities and doing things. So the one thing I've always got to factor into my day is some shopping at the end of the day so I can go home with something for my wife and son. So I do that. I do some shopping. And of course, I pay for my shopping with credit card, because I'm American and everybody pays for everything with credit cards. And once I'm done, well, I'm not actually American, I'm Scottish, but I kind of live there. It's getting into my blood. And so I pay for everything with a credit card, and at that point, it's time for me to get on a plane yet again. I'll be getting on one tonight, not quite at 5 o'clock, at 5:30, so I'm stretching it a bit today. And I got on a plane, and of course on the plane I have my Weight Watchers meal, nice, and which is always very satisfying. I follow that off with a light dessert, and following on with light dessert, it's time finally to unwind when I get back with some Xbox. Now, Xbox is actually pretty important because today, as promised, I have an Xbox to give away. And what do we have? It comes with, it's black, apparently. Oh no, it comes away with a controller, it comes with a 120 gig drive, it's got a headset, Ethernet, all sorts of things in there. So I'll be giving this away at the end, and I'll be asking questions. You're not just going to get it for nothing. And I'm going to ask one question, and I'm going to follow up with two other questions. And the only restriction is that you need to have a business card or all your contact details available. We don't give away for nothing. So we need your business card and contact details. That's actually not just because we want to spam you. It's also because we actually, for compliance reasons, we also need to know who we're giving it to. And if you're a government employee, there's some extra paperwork we need to do around that. Okay, so if you don't have contact details or a business card or something on you, I'll be fascinated to hear your answers, but you're not going to get an Xbox. Okay. So anyway, I'm relaxing at the end of the day with my Xbox, and finally I get to sleep. And I dream of SQL Server and how it has helped me through the day. And the dreams I dream of SQL Server are about all these different ways it has supported me through the day. Now, you'll have realized, of course, that every one of these slides had a little logo in the corner, so they're all our customers. And that's a critical thing. And I'm not going to go through every single one of them, but let's just take a few examples of what these customers are doing with our data platform, our collaboration platform, and our productivity platform. And all these different customers in their different ways, and that's the important thing, they're all using in very different ways, they're all using these components. Let's start with Hilton. Hilton, a really interesting company. They are, of course, one of the world's largest hotel chains, and they hotels are all about filling rooms, as you probably expect. But one of the things that you probably don't realize is that the price of a hotel room actually varies through the day as they're trying to fill up the hotel room. And so, they're offering them online, they're offering them to customers who are calling up, and they're also offering them to agencies. They're offering them to things like airlines, for example, in case that a plane is delayed and people have to stay overnight. And so there's actually a kind of dynamic pricing going on continuously. And what Hilton do is they have used our data business intelligence stack to build their pricing model and their forecasting model. I can tell you as a result of this that one of the best times to book a hotel room is basically about 2 o'clock to 3 o'clock in the afternoon, because that's the point at which nearly all hotels have essentially booked their residents for the day. Check-in is mostly completed, and at that point they're desperately trying to sell off any other rooms that they can do in order to keep occupancy up, because they have a fixed cost of occupancy. And so almost every hotel company in the world works on a basis that's called revenue per available room. And revenue per available room is that in the number that the manager is targeted on. Hilton, using our system, actually bill revenue per available square foot, because they can take it to a much finer level of detail and understand the impact of different rooms and different pricing. So they've been able to optimize their process considerably using analysis services primarily at the back end to do this. So we like Hilton. They do some great work with us there. Another one who are really interesting are Starbucks. Now Starbucks, if you were to ask Starbucks what business intelligence products to use, they'd be one of these guys, like I said yesterday, who said 29. They have like everything in Starbucks. What they do that's interesting with Starbucks though is they use SharePoint, and they use SharePoint as their corporate portal for coordinating activities across all their stores. Now, one of the things about Starbucks is they have many, many different stores in many different countries, but they intend for the experience to be essentially the same as you go into different stores. So, for example, if I go into a Starbucks across the road in New Zealand, I expect it to be more or less the same experience as I get if I go to Starbucks on the Microsoft campus, or if I go to Starbucks in Beijing. I expect to have essentially the same Starbucks experience. That's part of their brand. In order to coordinate this across all their stores, they use SharePoint as their collaboration portal. And collaboration really is critical, not only to the success of companies like Starbucks, but also to almost any business intelligence project. Business intelligence projects aren't about, we used to talk about like quants and wonks sitting in rooms and doing, kind of obscure calculations. That's rarely part of what business intelligence does these days. It's primarily about making decisions and supporting decisions that can be driven across an entire enterprise. And that requires collaboration. So that's one of the reasons we emphasize collaboration at the heart of this. And then there's Citibank. Well, Citibank have what they call market montage, and they're a credit card company, and in order to issue credit on the credit cards, they actually have to have enough credit themselves in order to provide you with that service. Now, that means they don't want to take too much credit because they'd be paying interest on that, but on the other hand, they have to have enough to cover all the debts that people are incurring using Citibank credit cards. And like I say, Americans use a lot of credit cards, 200,000 updates a second to their system. And yet Citibank have to monitor that, and they want to tune it as closely as possible because they don't want to pay too much interest on these goods, on this credit. So whenever you buy some goods with a credit card, you're updating the Citibank system, and Citibank is looking at that and saying, well, how much credit do we need to cover that? And is there anything we can do by moving funds around in the market to optimize that system? So Citibank's market montage application runs on SQL Server. Continental Airlines, I'm going to use this slide. It's probably the very last time I'm going to use it because they merge with United Airlines next month, I think, almost completely, and this application may go away. But their website was driven entirely by SharePoint at the front end, with SQL Server at the back end. And again, this is an airline company, so they have to have continuous updates for customers based on things like weather conditions and flight conditions and things like that, and all the other special offers that they make. So they have a highly optimized web system, which is actually dynamically driven by SQL Server. And that was one of our kind of highlight projects. To be honest, I think this one does go away when they merge with United, but it was a great example of somebody running a web property using SQL Server. So the three kind of parts of this that I always emphasize is the three parts of our three platforms. Microsoft, we're essentially a platform company. You'll always hear us say this. It's not a master data services application; it's a master data services platform. We've got a data quality platform, and it's an integration platform. We have more platforms than the Jackson 5, I think. And in this case, when I build the 3 platforms, the heart of it for me, because I'm a SQL Server guy, is the data platform. Data, it's all about data. It's data fundamentally runs the business. So we have SQL Server as the data platform, and above that, as I was emphasizing earlier, we have the collaboration platform, which is all about how people work together with applications. Now, this is actually something that's important because it would be great. If we're data people, we tend to think of, and I certainly do as a data platform, as being primary. But there's a kind of truth that it's an uncomfortable truth if you're a data guy like me, which is that people don't trust data. Business users don't trust data. They trust other business users. They trust other people. Much more. We're fundamentally social animals, and we have this sense of trust of other people. Now, what I mean by that is, let's say I was to build a report, and I was to publish this report out to the system, and this report showed something controversial, such as falling sales numbers. When in fact the board had been expecting our sales numbers to be up in the last quarter, in fact my report shows that it's gone down. What did the board do? Do they drill into the metadata and the lineage? Do they demand a complete data audit? Do they track back through every calculation to make sure it's correct? Or do they say, hey, Donald builds good reports, he's probably right? Actually, they do the latter. They primarily trust the person who built it. Now, if things still look wrong, they may well ask for the other audits, but that tends to happen further down the stack. It tends to be, that would be the IT manager or somebody who may review it, and even then he'd probably only ask for the review if he didn't trust the developer or felt there was some reason not to trust the developer who's building it. Fundamentally, we trust other people. And, we build a whole lot of stuff for compliance into our data systems. But ultimately, the way in which decisions are made, and remember, I'm saying yesterday that business intelligence is primarily about decision making. It isn't made on the basis of carefully calibrated data lineage and impact analysis and metadata. It's actually made on that gut feel about whether we trust the results that we're seeing. And that's a very social thing. So it's no surprise, really, that the collaboration platform, not the data platform, is the new critical part of business intelligence, because that's where this level of trust happens. The other thing that's happening in our platform is that people are starting to interact socially. And what I mean by interact socially is we're recruiting people into Microsoft who, their primary interface with their friends and colleagues is through Facebook or through Twitter. And, I know a lot of companies who actually lock down Facebook and Twitter because they don't want those social collaborations going on. The very fact that they have to lock them down is a reflection of how important they are to the people who are using them. They actually become a channel for people to communicate within the business. And so we've actually built into SharePoint a sort of kind of Facebook-style interactions, very, very simplified at this stage, but including things like being able to add annotations, being able to add tags, and being able simply to vote with a kind of thumbs up, thumbs down for different reports and analyses. And it turns out that, knowing who built a report, knowing who else is using it, and if they've given it a thumb up or thumb down, that's actually most of what people need in order to trust something for making decisions with. They don't need all the lineage and metadata in the background. They would use that as a backup if they had some reason to distrust it. People often talk, there's a guy called Dennis Paroli, who wrote a great paper, and in fact a whole book, based on research he'd done for the US Navy, what they call information foraging. And information foraging is the idea that the way in which we look for and use information is actually rather similar to the skills that our hunter-gatherer ancestors, or even hunter-gatherers today, use for tracking down animals and for foraging for food. And they use systems that they call scatter-gather. They don't call it scatter-gather, but scatter-gather is an approach where you find a group of some information. It could be some scent markers or whatever, or in our case, it could be search results coming back from Bing. Or it could be, I go to a portal and I see an initial set of reports. And then the next thing you do is you drill down on one of those paths. If you're a forager, you literally follow the path. If you're in a business intelligence world, you open the document. If you're in search, you follow the link. And then you find that, and if you don't like it, you go back to where you were before and you follow another path. And the art of information foraging is being able to choose those paths effectively. And the art of making information available to foragers, Paroli calls it giving good information scent, giving people the information they need to follow that path to know that it's the right path to follow. But not only that, not only does it have to give good information sent, but good information sent has to be immediately accessible to you. It has to be something that you immediately understand. And that's why collaboration and these indicators like tags and thumbs up, thumbs down, and who else is using it is so important, because we immediately understand it. As social animals, we're wired to immediately understand these things. And that's why things like lineage and impact analysis and metadata and all these things and calculations are less important, because they take, first of all, they take more time to process. So the act of following the scent is more involved and more complicated, but also it's not the kind of thing we viscerally react to. Now, to give you an example of why information scent is important as part of this collaboration platform, think of, I take the example actually of my wife, who is often searching for things on the internet, and she finds great bargains on the internet, and every now and then she'll come and say, oh yeah, we had to get, the new heart medication for the cat, and I found it online and I ordered it, and it's only like $30. And I think, well, that's fantastic, thanks very much. And it comes back, and in fact, it takes 2 weeks to arrive, and the shipping cost is $50 because she'd actually found it in New Zealand. And it's New Zealand dollars and not Australian and not American dollars. And the result of that is that because it wasn't giving her the scent that she needed to pick up on that. And I'm not blaming her. It's just because the website isn't designed to give that kind of information. Of course, if you were searching for a website and you found it locally, you'd expect it to be in New Zealand dollars. So there's no need for the site to give good information sent about the currency. But for whatever reason, my wife isn't sensitive to the possibility that there may be different currencies out there that are called dollars, so she doesn't pick up on that scent. And I'm not blaming her for that. It's the problem, in a sense, with the website. The website is living in a world where there are different people accessing it, and it's giving off, if you like, not the wrong scent, but no scent at all about its currency. So these things are kind of something to think about when you're thinking about how people are going to consume business intelligence in your organization. Are you giving off good information sent? Now, the last thing in this stack that's important to talk about is this idea of Microsoft Office as being the end user tools. And people often talk to us about, what's your business intelligence end user tool? And the example I typically give is, we use Excel. We have other end user tools as well. Actually, PowerPoint is probably one of the number one ways that people use for presenting data and for presenting analyses. I know within Microsoft, PowerPoint is like our standard way of exchanging information, which may explain a lot about us, I don't know, but it's there's some psychologists would say it does. But we primarily don't exchange information in the form of written reports or documents. When I was started in business, almost every business collaboration I did, the result of it was a Word document that somebody would read. Nowadays, I can tell you, the end result of most of what I do is a PowerPoint that somebody will look at. And it's a very different experience. But whatever those experiences are, it still tends to be Office Client, which is used there, whether it's Excel, whether it's PowerPoint, whether it's Word. And I'll be showing you later on how Visio can be used as a front end for business intelligence tools, and some of the work that Visio has done in 2010 to make that possible. So, having spoken about those different kind of the day in my life and how the business intelligence and collaboration platform supports that, let's get on to talking about different ways of looking at business intelligence and how that factors into our products. This is the Gartner Magic Quadrant for Business Intelligence in 2010. And if you look at this really closely, you'll see, can you see it okay? Yeah, you kind of can. So here's Oracle up here, okay? And here's Microsoft beside them. So we're both there in the leaders quadrant. And we kind of like to be up there beside them. Now, if you looked at it really, really, really closely, you would probably tell me that Oracle are slightly above Microsoft, like a millimeter above Microsoft, and are a little bit to the right. So surely that means that Oracle's business intelligence is better than Microsoft's, like marginally. And I've got to say, Oracle have great business intelligence. They just have a super release out this year as well, which they deservedly are very proud of. But there's something very important about this. The first thing is we are there with them as leaders in this sector. That's without doubt. There's very clearly we are leaders in business intelligence. Gartner go on, however, to say something that I think is critical, not for today, not for the current situation, but for every day in the future, which is that Microsoft is the only mega vendor out of SAP, Oracle, IBM, and Microsoft who are above average for both capabilities and ease of use. The ease of use part is really important to us because our message has always been about getting business intelligence into the hands of every user who could benefit from it. And today, if you talk to people like Gartner, Forrester, IDC, they'll tell you that only about 20% of users actually have business intelligence, access to business intelligence. And we want to reach that other 80%. And of course, we intend to do that through our Office tools like Excel, which has 500 million users worldwide. So this is actually really critical for us in order for us to get to the BI market. Now, I think of the BI market, or think of maybe not the market so much as what people do with business intelligence, as falling into two standards. First of all, there's personal business intelligence and there's standardized business intelligence. Most of us do standardized. If you're doing a business project, business intelligence in your project in your company today, you're probably doing standardized. Standardized is driven by what I call the 3 S's, which is standards, scalability, and skills. So I give the example, I think I used this yesterday, of the human resources warehouse at Microsoft, which has to be compliant with every individual's contract and every law about human resource information, personal information, has to be highly scalable to reach every one of our employees and managers. And if you're going to build something which is built to those demanding standards and has to be highly scalable, then you need mad skills in order to build that. You need to be good at building business intelligence systems. And the opposite end of that is personal business intelligence. And the example I gave yesterday is I want to make some fine adjustments to my team's vacation time to make up for lost hours that they've spent working overnight or at weekends. And I need to do that myself. I need to do that on my desktop. And because the standardized system does not, will not, and should not allow me to do that. So I end up with these two worlds of personal analysis and standardized analysis. And if that was all it was, we would be fairly happy. But there is another problem, which is this third world that emerges of team business intelligence. And team business intelligence is where I build something and I start to share it with someone. And soon I've shared it with everyone in the organization. And before you know it, the organization is actually running on that system. Now, I've seen many examples of this in different companies, and I've seen the example I often give of an airline company. Did I use this one yesterday? No, I don't think I did. It was an airline company that we were doing some basic research in Power Pivot. So we go and visit customers and we sit down and we talk to them about their products and what they're using today and what they would like, features they would like, and so on. And in the middle of this discussion at an airline company in the US, somebody came into the room and said to the IT manager, "You've got to come in. We've got a real problem." So he left the room and left us there drinking his coffee and eating his donuts. And then about 2 hours later, he came back and said, "Well, that was tough." And we said, "Well, what happened?" He said, "Well, our cargo validation application failed." We said, "Oh, that does sound bad." He said, "Oh, it's worse than that. We had planes backed up on runways all around the United States unable to take off because we couldn't validate the cargo to enable the plane to take off." We said, "That sounds terrible." He said, "Oh, it's worse than that. Until that guy came in this morning, we didn't even know we had a cargo validation application." And the problem there was that somebody had built a personal solution. Some cargo manager got fed up doing all the paperwork, so he built his own application that did it. And then he shared it with other people. He just put it on a USB stick and said, "Here, I do this, and it saves me 50 minutes on every flight, so you take it and do it." And so the next thing you know, all the cargo managers are using it. It had been written into the cargo manager's operations manual, but nobody told IT. And then IT did something crazy, like they consolidated all their access databases onto one share, and before you knew it, they broke a connection string in the Excel workbook, and cargo validation application failed. Meanwhile, the guy had gone off to work for another company, and nobody could contact him, and nobody even knew how to hack the Excel workbook in order to fix the problem. So they just had to take it down, tell everybody to go back to the manual system. So, there's a problem that the flexibility of personal business intelligence does not meet the standards and formality of standardized business intelligence, but applications can migrate between the two without you being aware of it. And that's something that we've been very focused on fixing in 2008 R2. And we call our solution to that managed self-service. And that is really where Power Pivot comes into this, because Power Pivot is the heart of our managed self-service application. The managed self-service is different from self-service simply in the fact that we give IT what we call insight and oversight. And I'm going to come to the back of that in a moment. But the two main parts of Power Pivot are the Excel client and the SharePoint server. And the SharePoint server also runs SQL Server in the background, actually SQL Server Analysis Services in the background, in order to provide the data manipulation and data processing that's required. We want to give end users these very familiar tools. I said, there's 500 million Excel users out there. There is a whole body of SQL skills, of Excel skills in any organization that can be brought to bear on business problems. The difficulty being that today, if they use Excel natively, they could run into that cargo validation problem. So the other thing we want to give them is also familiar data. Now, the data aspect of this, I was saying the business users trust people rather than data. There's another thing about business users, which is business users primarily don't know much about data. Now, I was giving the example of the human resources data warehouse within Microsoft, and when I use that as a manager, it's an SAP system in the back end. Now, I work on the Microsoft SAP Alliance. I worked on SAP connectivity for integration services and analysis services and reporting services for years. I know my SAP systems pretty well. I understand all about the internals of it, well, not all about it, but I understand a lot about the internals of it. And yet, when I sit down to look at my human resources information, I never write an ABAP query that goes to the back-end server. I never worry about single sign-on. I never worry about calling the right BAPI, the right business API, in order to get the information out of SAP. I never see anything with the five-letter German acronyms that SAP uses for everything internally. I see reports. I see HR reports. That's how I interact with the SAP system. I never write code against it, even though I can. As a manager, I just use reports. Business users, how many of you would give a business user a connection string and say, go learn SQL and now you can get your data? We don't do that. We give them reports. And yet reports are restricted because you only get what IT give you. Now we can provide self-service reporting, but they still need to be able to get to the back-end data. So what we've introduced in 2008 R2 is something that I think is quite possibly the most important feature in the entire stack, but something that we actually probably don't talk enough about. And let's see if this one's going to work. Here we go. Okay, so this is a report. And this report is in Reporting Services 2008 R2, and it shows the daily sales for, well, for probably the world's most volatile company by the looks of it. But I can see the trends. I see this nice picture, and I've got spark lines, and I've got all these nice visualizations, all of which are new in 2008 R2. And now I want to use that data. I want to do an analysis of it. I say, hey, these sales are great, by the way, but I'd really like to know how they compare year over year, or quarter over quarter, or month over month. How do I get that information? All I've got is a graph here. I would need to go back to IT and say, no, that's not enough for me. I need the quarterly by quarter information. And IT would say, well, maybe we'll get that for you in 3 months' time. Get it next quarter, because we're busy just now. Or they might say, well, here's a connection string. Go knock yourself out and issue some queries. None of that helps. There is a way that we can give them the data, though. And it's the secret is this little orange button here. And that's called Export to Data Feed. Now, what's interesting here is, first of all, these little orange buttons are important, because if you live in a world of Internet Explorer, you'll be familiar with this. You've probably seen these orange buttons when you're looking for RSS feeds. Now, they're very easy to use. You click on them. And so I'll give you an example of this. My mother, who is 81, she's really into knitting, and of course. And I don't know if you know this, the online knitting community is a pretty, I'm not sure how I'd put it. Let me be politically correct. Interesting place to hang out. I mean, it's really vicious. I mean, there's all sorts of controversies and things about that, in the knitting community. But my mother loves knitting. So what she's discovered is that she can search. I think she bings. I hope she bings. I suspect she does the other thing, but we'll have that conversation next time I go home. And so she searches for stuff to do with knitting. And if they give off good information sent, she follows the link. And she knows that if she finds a site with this orange button, that she can click on that, and every day in her inbox, she gets articles about knitting from that site. So if she finds one she likes, she clicks on the orange button, she gets the article. She subscribes to it. Now, I can tell you, my mother, smart woman though she is, she knows nothing about RSS feeds. She knows nothing about POP3 mail. She knows nothing about TCP IP. She just knows when she sees the orange button, she clicks on it, she gets the article she's interested in. For these business users, if they see a report they're interested in and they want to do something more with it, they click on the orange button and they get the data as a feed. So I can do it. I'll phone my mother and see if she can debug. Let me just refresh it. It'll come back up. I think I just timed out there. That's what happens when you spend too long talking and not enough time demoing. Right? So this will refresh, and exciting things will happen in a moment. Now, when I get this data feed, let me just explain what's happening. On this report, I had a graph, which was kind of here, and I had spark lines, which were kind of over there, and they were graphics. They were pictures of the data. When I go to reporting services and ask for the report, I say, please give me the data rendered as a graph. And reporting services, that's what it does. It goes back to the original database. I don't know anything about where it came from. I don't know if this came from an SAP system or Oracle Financials or Dynamics or anything, J.D. Edwards, anything like that. All I know is I ask for the report and it gives me the picture. When I click the orange button, I ask for the report and it gives me an XML feed of the data. In other words, I'm not going back to the original database. Reporting services is going back to the database for me. In fact, it may be answering this from its cache. It doesn't even need to go back to the original database. So I'm going to pull the data in here. And I have some already loaded in the background. At this point, I just go through a wizard. And you can see that there are different objects. I can actually see the sales chart. I can choose to get the data behind the spark lines. In this case, let me choose the sales chart. And I'll click Finish. And it'll import the data. Now, at this point, thing to notice is I've asked for this data. At no point have I issued a connection string, a query. I haven't browsed the original metadata objects. I haven't had to understand any of the underlying column names or data types or any of those things that might concern me. I just ask for the data and I get it delivered to me by the reporting services application. Report server at this point, as I say, could be caching the data so I get better performance. It's handling the security and authentication. It's handling all the metadata issues at the back end. All I'm doing is just asking for the data because I've seen it in a chart. The reason I think this is so important is, first of all, it makes it super easy for business users to get the data they need. It also makes it super easy for IT departments to provision that data effectively, because business users know where to find their reports. They're already looking at them every day. They know how to connect to them. They can quickly learn how to use this orange button. A report can contain rich and complex metadata if you want. I can have pages of information about every column in there if I need to expose metadata to the user. So now I get the data into this form, and it comes into Power Pivot. Now I'm going to do something with this data. I've got a date column there, for example, and I can just rename that to be date. And what I'll do there is also go in, and because the dates came in as text, I'm actually going to change it and make it into a date type because I want to do something with it. It doesn't matter if I just wanted to use it as text, that would be okay. I'm going to rename this as sales total for the day. So I've got that. And now I can actually, as an Excel user, I can actually start to do stuff like extract the year from the date column. So I can do that. And say OK. Now that's a simple Excel function, which just frankly it just looks like any Excel function that I'd use to extract a year. I can do the same here and do it for month. Let me just do that. Equals month. Extract it from the date and rename that. And now I've got, from a chart, I now have the date, I have the sales total, I have the year and the month. So what I could now go and do is build a pivot table. And in fact, I've got one in the background there that I could show you if you want, but I'll do it on the new worksheet and show you the nice things I can do. And I can say something like, well, give me the sales total, obviously on values, which will go there. And give me that sorted by month on the row labels. So now I get sales per month. And give me a year on the slicer, so I can do something nice there and divide it up by different years. I could go in here, and because it's Excel and the standard Excel features, I can go in and do conditional formatting and say, show me this as color scale, so I can see. Sorry, that was a bad move. Let me do that one. There's no point including the total in that, is there? Conditional formatting, color scales. Do that. wish I could clear the formatting from that, but I'll just leave it just now. And that's a very, very simple dashboard that I built out of my financial system. But I can do more than that because I can start to add new functions. So I'm going to go in here and say, well, what I really want to see is the year-to-date sales. And I have a function in the language that comes with Power Pivot called DAX, that's what we call the language, which is total year-to-date, total month-to-date, total quarter-to-date. So I'm going to do total year-to-date. Total year-to-date. And the total year-to-date is going to be the sum of total sales. Oh, sorry, sales total. Where did I find it? Sum of, yeah, that one there. Sum of sales total. And I need to give it the date that I actually want to filter on. So that will be daily sales chart date. I'm going to give it a filter to take account of everything in the system rather than filtering it out by current context. So that will be daily sales chart. And if I check that, yay, no errors. Okay, cool. Always good to see. So now what I've done is added year-to-date sales. And I can go in there and format that with conditional formatting and data bars and just do that. And you can see that my year-to-date sales nicely accumulate. Let me just go into these again and edit it. And take this one. Just copy it and add a new one. And now what I'm going to do is financial year-to-date and take that formula, and all I need to do to make it a financial year-to-date is give it the end of the financial year, which is in the US, as US format that my machine is in, is 30th of June. And now I have financial year-to-date in there, which I can add conditional formatting and data bars there, and you'll see there that the financial year resets in the middle. So what have I built here? Well, I started with a chart. As a business user, they give me a chart using Excel formulas, which most people learn pretty easily. I've gone from having a chart to having a financial dashboard, which gives me cumulative sales, year-to-date sales, and financial year-to-date sales. I haven't had to go back to IT and say, I want to do this extra analysis. I just do it myself. So this is why we call it self-service. Self-service business intelligence is part of that. The reason we call it managed self-service is that when I come to publish this, we publish it to the server. And here's an example of one that I've already published to a server. And on this server, first of all, I can browse for different solutions. But it's refreshable. I can set it up to refresh on a schedule if I need to. It's actually can be a data source for other people to build. I can add tags like I like it, or tags and notes and things like that, so other people can say they're using it. And IT track all this usage. They find out how many documents I'm publishing, who is using the documents that I'm publishing, what data sources are used by the documents I'm publishing. And IT get this complete insight into what I'm doing because they have complete control of the server. So I have got self-service in the sense of flexibility and power. They have self-service in the form of insight and oversight. Now, the reason I think this is important and significant is, first of all, I'm solving what had been one of the big problems for business users. I'm giving them data easily. But I'm also solving one of the big issues for IT, that when I do collaborate with it, I'm collaborating in a way that IT can manage the process. Now, I'm very careful, I'll skip over that silly quote, but I'm very careful to say that we give insight and oversight. I'm not saying that I'm giving you control. And the reason I'm not saying that is because I'd be lying to you. Anyone who says that you can completely control what your business users do with data is living in a fantasy world. I compare it to Jurassic Park. And I don't know if you've noticed the scene in Jurassic Park where they're digging around in the roots of a tree and they find a dinosaur egg. And that's not meant to happen because the dinosaurs were all genetically modified. But this egg is there, and they all look at each other in horror and say, well, nature always finds a way. Well, I can tell you, business users always find a way. It doesn't matter what you do. I know one company, a bond trading company in the US, they locked down the corporate desktop. You couldn't open any files that IT didn't allow you to open. You couldn't print anything that IT didn't allow you to print. You couldn't even take a screenshot because they disabled print screen. So there was no way you could get the data in these documents. They were PDF files, so they weren't easy to copy. I went in and there was a guy who built a whole bunch of spreadsheets off them. And how did he do it? He took a digital camera, took a picture of the screen, took it home, put it through OCR, got the optical character recognition, found all the numbers, brought it back into the office on a stick, And they found a way to get the data that way. The guys in the IT department were horrified, and they said, "Oh, we've fixed that. We've superglued shut all the USB ports, so we can't do that anymore." And he's just going to do it at home. He's going to bring in his laptop or something. If you don't give business users what they need, they are going to find a way to solve their problem. He wasn't a criminal. He was just trying to solve a business problem. And the idea that somehow I can give IT control is a fiction. Give them insight and oversight, and give business users tools which are easy to use and attractive enough so that they do it the right way. Then you're actually making your organization not only more functional, but in a sense more collaborative and more integrated as well. So we love Power Pivot from that point of view. Okay, insightful tools. Nice quotes from Forrester about how clever we are. Okay, right. Next thing I think that's important is if any of you have been to any of the data sessions that Ed Kataba has been giving about visualization and geospatial, you'll realize that that's becoming critically important as part of the data stack. In reporting services, we've really built up our geospatial visualizations now with some really nice map controls. The other thing we've done is that just adds on to already nice visualizations that people are using. And these all came in SQL Server 2008 and map visualizations in R2. Because the truth is, when I say that people trust people more than they trust data or metadata, the truth is they also trust beautiful reports more than they trust ugly reports. Actually, they probably trust beautiful people more than they trust ugly people, but I don't want to go there. I think that's a completely different subject. But it is actually true that if the data is well presented and attractive, people trust it more. First of all, they feel that more effort has gone into it, even if it hasn't. But also, a well-presented and attractive data is easier to understand, and the visual stimulus it gives you is actually adds to your understanding of the information. You can find extra information from great visualizations. So visualization has been really important for us, and we've spent a lot of time, effort, and I suppose money in the 2008 time frame doing this. We've added to it in 2008 R2. In the future, and then when I say in the future, I mean next year, you will see coming out even richer visualizations using Silverlight as a front end for visualizing business intelligence information. And we're very excited about that project, and you'll see more of that coming out over the next few months. And then you'll see betas next year, then you'll see it releasing with SQL Server 11. So we're really excited about that as well. That's going to take this to a whole other level with animations and things involved too. We also added this idea of what we call grab-and-go reporting, which is a bit, well, I'm not sure the title actually explains it, but the idea of grab-and-go reporting is I can start with some fairly standard reports, but I can take individual objects within the report and say that I want to save not the report, but the objects to the server. So I can take, for example, I don't think that's rendered very well, unfortunately, with the way the screen is scaled. But essentially I can say, give me the logo, give me the chart, give me this chart here that I was using up in the corner, or give me the logo from this report, and save that to a server. So that somebody else can come along and actually compose a new report from the objects that have already been published. Now, the reason that's interesting is, first of all, business users can decompose things that they're doing into units of work that can be shared, but also IT can ship standard components to people. If IT are building standardized systems, they can say, we're not going to build every report you need, but here are the controls you need to get started. And not only that, you can modify these controls. You can edit them. You can edit them and save them back. You can keep them synchronized with the version that we publish. So very often when you hear business users talking about, I need to build this report, it's often not net new. It's actually based on existing reports that are there. They just want the visualization to be different, or they want to add an extra column or something like that. And in this way, you can provide them with that functionality that they can start from pre-built components. So this is a kind of form, if you like, of self-service reporting, as opposed to something like Power Pivot, which is self-service start from scratch with the raw data. We've had some people who are really successful with this. I just want to quickly run through some companies that we're kind of proud of who are doing this. Mediterranean Shipping. great company. They did something really fascinating. I think this one, I'm going to spend more time on this one than the others. I'll just flip through the others. Mediterranean Shipping have a real problem, which is they're one of the world's largest shipping companies. You have 22 terabytes of data concerning all the container ships and all the containers that come in and out of all the ports around the world that they ship to. They understand that information. In 2005, they were our highlight customer for SQL Server 2005. They really understand all that data that they've got very well. What they didn't understand was how they compared to other shipping companies in the business. Are we better than Maersk? Are we less than Maersk? How do our sales, how do our shipping rates, or how do our cargo numbers in Africa compare to other companies in Africa, for example? They knew what they were doing, but they didn't know what other people were doing. Well, it turned out that there is a source of that public information, and it is published by U.S. Customs. U.S. Customs publish information on every ship that comes in and out of American ports. So in theory, they could take their 22 terabytes of internal data, this XML data from the U.S. Customs website, and mash it together. In practice, it took them 3 months. They weren't able to do it in the end. The IT department weren't able to deliver that result. And the problem wasn't that they weren't smart. It wasn't that it was technically incredibly challenging. It was simply that the IT department didn't have full time to give resources to that one project. It was interesting enough, but they didn't have full-time resources to put on it. And secondly, the IT department and the business users couldn't really get the data mashed up together properly, because the business users would look at, for example, the 3-letter abbreviation for a US port and immediately know that it was San Diego. But the IT department had no system that knew that. The business users just knew it. And so the business users, this thing which had been a part of their business all along, to the IT department was a difficult thing to code. And it meant there was continuous collaboration required between business users and IT. IT just couldn't do it on their own. The result, in fact, was that after 3 months they hadn't succeeded, and they just kind of shelved the project and said, well, that's a nice thing, but we'll not get to it. With Power Pivot on beta, they were able to do the same thing in one morning, in 3 hours. And that's not because I'd love it if there was some amazing technical breakthrough in Power Pivot that I could say, we just magically did all this. It's not. It's simply that we gave tools to the business users. And so business users didn't need to go back to IT every time there was a new abbreviation or every time they needed an extra column of data in the report. They were just able to do it themselves. IT provisioned the data from the data warehouse. Business users got the data from the US Customs, and they could do it themselves. And as a result, there was no to and froing about definitions and requirements. Business users built their own solution. And it only took them 3 hours as opposed to the 3 months that they'd spent trying to build a solution with the help of IT. So we like that one because it's an example not just of real, I mean, there is technology behind that, but it's primarily, it solved that business problem. Care Group are doing something which you might be interested in because they're analyzing not external data. In fact, they're not even using Power Pivot in this case to analyze, say, patient data in their healthcare system. They're analyzing the audit logs generated by SQL Server in order to find out who's touching, who's reading, who's writing the patient data. They're actually analyzing their own IT metadata, their own operational metadata, and they're using Power Pivot to do that. We kind of like that system. It took them a week to do it, but then it's a much more complex system with many more data sources. Bank of New Zealand, you may have heard of them. They're doing some work around the end-of-month reconciliations. Got to be really careful what I say about this one because somebody might be here in the audience. But they did a great job with this. And one of the things that's interesting about it is they are continuously adding these new reconciliations every month. It's a continuous process. If they built this as a standard IT solution, they would need to go back to IT every month and ask for new reports. And that would become part of a more complex business process. The users can do this themselves and generate the results themselves with this solution. So the feedback we've had has been great. This will be in the download, but we've had some great information back from customers about it. And one of the things I actually like about it is people saying that our analysts can do anything in Excel. So integrating Excel is extremely popular. It makes it easier to explore our 17 terabyte data warehouse. Excel as a front end for a 17 terabyte data warehouse is a realistic solution with these technologies. Now, if you're talking about these large data systems, ultimately we also have to talk about master data. And master data is a particular area of solving a a problem of definitions in the business intelligence world and in the data world. You need master data if you need, we often talk about now a single version of the truth, which data warehousing is meant to provide, but actually data warehouse is only one of many systems. There are also operational systems. There may be several data warehouses. There will be different reporting systems. Master data intends to provide a reliable source of information for all these systems, both operational and analytic. The data is probably typically slowly changing in the sense that you manage the versions of your customers, but your customer information changes over time. You're not managing transactions in master data. It's stuff like customers changing addresses, products changing their color, that sort of thing. We often call it the nouns of the business. Anything you can put a name on, we're probably covering in master data. And then there are many systems involved in it. This is also important. It's not just one system. You'll often hear people saying things like, I can solve this easily. I'll just build an application to do it. I don't need to use the Microsoft platform just to get one version of a record. Or I can just do this in my ETL process. That's where I'll do it. Integration services can pull all these sources together. Or I'll use my data warehouse as my source of information. Or I'll use my ERP system. I'll put everything into SAP, and as long as everything's in SAP, it's all totally consistent, and the world is perfect. Or I'll just edit it myself, and I'll give it to the business users. And there's problems with that. First of all, you're going to build the app. We've already built most of that infrastructure. It's an expensive process to build that app, and it probably never does everything you need. I can do it with ETL, but ETL has no human process as part of it. It just runs as a batch job. A lot of things like saying, is this version of the customer the one that I want to use, is a human process that probably requires somebody from your CRM team to look at it and say, that looks right, or it requires a sales manager to intervene and say, no, I want to change the credit level for that customer, or something like that. Okay, I can pull it from the warehouse, but how does it get there in the first place? How does the warehouse have the single consolidated version of the truth? Or I can get it from the ERP system. But you know something, that all your data isn't in the ERP system. And not only that, the more you try to restrict people in controlling the data that they can put in and take out of a system, the more they find ways around it. Just like I was talking about that analyst with his camera and the USB stick and the OCR. I see people in shops doing this. I was in the store. I had a very simple thing I wanted to do. I had an article which cost $19.99 from the clothing department, and that's a nice Christmas present, thanks Granny, but I'd much rather have a new USB stick for $19.99, but it's from a completely different department. So I take back the clothing and I try and swap it from something in electronics, and the girl says, oh, I don't know if I can do that, because it's completely different departments, can't I just give you a credit? And I'm standing there with a USB stick and a jumper and saying, well, this is simple. She says, well, no, I don't have a code for it. And so eventually what she does is she puts in a completely different code and says that the jumper is defective, and then changes the USB code to look like a jumper, and she gives me, and says, if anybody in security asks you, just show them this receipt, not that receipt. And I left quite happily. She was cheating the ERP system because the ERP system was attempting to create a single version of the truth by restriction, but it didn't meet all the requirements of the business. Alternatively, I could just edit everything directly, but if I do that, it's really difficult to scale that or make it collaborative. So what we do in master data services is, first of all, it's not a new concept because we've been doing this for years. We called it reference data. We called it all sorts of things before. It's not even a technology as such. It's more, and this is where we really get down to the idea that it's platform. It's really about providing you with a set of tools in one place that allow you to do things that we've been doing for some years. I'm going to swap over quickly and see if I can show you this. Okay. Just a couple of things that we can do in Master Data Services. What I've got here is Master Data Manager, as soon as it comes up. And Master Data Manager allows me to look at different models. I'm going to look at, say, for a customer model just now. And very importantly, we have versioning. And the reason we have versioning is because this data changes over time. And you may want at some point to go back and say, what did our product hierarchy look like last year at the time of our annual sale? Not what does it look like now, but what did it look like last year, so we can analyze these sales. If I want to administer the system, I can go in and look at different models like the customer model. And one of the most important things we can do with it is create different views of this data. Let me just take a little while there to expand that. Take different views of this data, which allows people to see different views of the customer. Now, what's important is the customer name will always be the same. The customer's telephone number will always be the same because there's only one version of the customer. But the sales and marketing department probably need the customer's telephone number. The production department who are creating the product that we're going to send to them, they may need to know the customer's country because that might be important for building a special version of the product. They probably don't need to know the telephone or the email or the website or the customer type. So you have different views of that data that's required by different teams within your organization. So what we do in master data management is enable you to create those different views and manage them, and then very importantly manage them changing over time. And the way in which we then integrate it with other systems is simply by generating SQL Server views. And each view represents what an individual team needs or an individual system needs. Now, one of the reasons that we make these SQL Server views, if I come to export it, is simply this. I won't actually create one, but I would just add a view here and say, here's my view of customers, now export it. The reason I would make it a SQL Server view is because views can be maintained, they can be read, and they can be written to by almost any application that can read and write a table. And so by creating a SQL Server view, we make the integration with other applications very simple. Now, you can integrate APIs if you want to. It's just much easier to do it through views because almost anybody can write that code to make that happen. SharePoint also has some important features. I'm going to skip over some of the SharePoint features. We're going to do it a little bit quickly. I'm a little bit running out of time, but there's a couple of things I want to get across here. First of all is there's now one site in SharePoint where you go for business intelligence. It's a SharePoint portal which is specifically geared for reports, analytics, and workbooks. We have scorecarding in SharePoint, which means that you can build that KPI dashboard, that strategic dashboard that your high-level strategic decision makers need to use. But you can also drill down from that into the scorecards using things like the decomposition tree in order to get more information from it. People can even, if your KPIs come from analysis services or are written by IT, people can also compose new KPIs, such as current sum of sales divided by number of customers, without having to write a new KPI themselves. They just compose it from existing KPIs, which means making rich dashboards much easier. We can give you a report of every single KPI with details of where it came from, what filters are being applied to it, and so on. We can provide the decomposition tree, which is the next step of saying, I see this number, how is it changed, why is it changed, what is this number made up of? The decomposition tree is an analytic tool, but it's a very high-level analytic tool. It's not like Power Pivot or Excel where you get right down to the grain of the data. It takes you down a few steps and enables you to explore your solution. Dashboard Designer has been improved to help you improve, to create newer ones. We also provide some really nice analytic reports, including support for analysis services formatting. So IT can actually say how a specific number should be formatted, and if you drop it by default onto your chart or drop it by default onto your scorecard, it will show up in that way. You can edit it, but you get a default view driven by the enterprise. And then filters for enabling me to see, for example, only my department or only a certain month can apply to multiple dashboards. Excel services is actually an important part of this as well. It's part of SharePoint, lives in SharePoint, and provides a way for people to do three things with Excel that I think are important. It first of all allows them to share Excel workbooks or the components of workbooks without having to give access to the full workbook and its data to everyone else. The other thing it does that I think it's important is it enables people to interact with that workbook only using a web browser. So they don't need to have Excel on their machine. And that means they can even do it mobilely if they need to. The third thing they do is it enables you to do stuff on the server with this. You can interact with it programmatically, and IT can manage it if they need to. You can even make an Excel workbook part of an application on the server. What we've added in SQL Server in Office 2010 is that not only have we improved the performance, but we've also added collaboration to that, so you can work on dashboards collaboratively, workbooks collaboratively at the same time. It also has full fidelity, or it's getting close to full fidelity with Excel. So it supports all the new things we've done in Excel, like spark lines, and it even supports Power Pivot, interactive pivot tables, and sorting and filtering. So you're creating a much richer environment rather than just a simple HTML rendering. It's actually a very interactive environment. There's a REST API for programming against it. And sorry, I was going to say more. There's a REST API for programming against it. And also you can dynamically link. I think the contrast on this is a little bit odd, but what this is actually showing here is a Excel services workbook with data and a chart dynamically linked into a blog site using the REST API to do that dynamic linking. So your Excel services becomes a source for other people to use that. The last one I was wanted to get through quickly was just to, and I think we're kind of out of time, but we're going to just quickly go through this one, was to look at Visio. People don't think of Visio very much as a BI tool, but it has data-driven graphics. And those data-driven graphics are bound to data objects. And those data objects enable you to change the graphic visually or interact with the graphic visually going back to the core data. I'm going to just show you this. I'd rather show you it than talk about it. And this is a demo from a little site that we've put together of a fictional hotel and casino called Contoso. And I can go on here, and this is all built with Visio. And in this Visio example, all the diagrams that you're about to see are tied back to the data at the back end. So what I have coming up is the view that the casino manager would see of the casino. And so I can go into different things and see this, the poker room. But down here there's a set of table games. And if I want, I can click on this Visio shape, and it'll take me to the next diagram, which is linked into the underlying database. And I can start to see Visio renderings of the amount of money, for example, which is in play on different parts of the system. If I need to do that, I can go in and see different parts of it, go and see the high-stakes poker. And again, I can see exactly what's happening there. And this is tied into a back-end database. Now, you may be looking at this thinking, well, this isn't very realistic. But actually, we have customers in Macau and in Las Vegas who build systems like this, which are in real time. And the reason they can build them in real time is because every chip has an RFID tag, and they know exactly where they are on the table. So the only thing they don't know is who's actually the names of the guys sitting at the table. So this is actually a realistic way of building an interactive, using Visio as a renderer for back-end system. Okay, I'm really getting out of time, but let me try one more thing. I think I pretty much wrapped up. Yeah, so lots of Visio examples of how we can do these things using IT to visualize network traffic and so on. Some nice vertical examples. Very, very good for doing visualizations of anything that's spatial, but not necessarily geospatial in the form of maps. I hope I've got across three things, and I know it's been a bit rushed. We've got a lot to talk about. The importance of the data server. SQL Server underlies all this. I hope I've made the point about the importance of the collaboration server. I think that's critical. And I think the client, our focus on the client is still very, very much part of what we're doing. We are trying to make Excel, we're recognizing Excel as being the heart of what people do in business intelligence. And that's important. Excel is the default tool for many people. It's not that we're putting all our bets in Excel, it's that we see it as being critical to our success and to your success. So with that, I'm going to thank you for being here today, and we're going to ask some critical questions. Now, those of you who have your business cards and contact information ready. There was a guy called Dennis Paroli who worked for the US Navy, who came up with a model for how users interact with information. What did he call it? Who was that? Information foraging, okay. So I've got two follow-up questions for you, okay? First of all, can you name 3 client tools in the Office end-user experience? That's 2. Okay, that's 3. And getting close here. And the final question, well, I'm going to have to think of a really difficult one now, haven't I? What did I mention earlier? Yeah. What hotel did I start my day in my typical day? Sorry? I started in the Hilton. Yeah, you've won yourself an Xbox. Well done. That's okay.